Today on the MrMaple Show podcast, Matt and Tim discuss what to know about Japanese maples during the summer.
Konnichiwa, y'all, and welcome to the Mr. Maple podcast. Guys, we love talking about Japanese maples. It's kind of our passion here. If you like that kind of thing, make sure to subscribe on any of your major podcast platforms. You can also watch us on YouTube under the Mr. Maple Show.
Hey, y'all, I'm Tim. This is my brother, Matt. We love Japanese maples. It's our passion. And today we're going to be talking to you about what to know about Japanese maples in the summer. I mean, the summer hits, you have a lot of heat, and you got to figure out what in the world to do with my Japanese maples. And it's probably one of the least eventful times for many Japanese maple cultivars. I know we've got a top 50 podcast on ones that are super interesting in the summer because there's some that just stand out in the summer. But normally Japanese maples are known for that spring and that fall interest.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about what you should expect. Maybe what your expectations should be for the summer on Japanese maples. And we're going to kind of give you some things to look at that sometimes lead people astray. People may misdiagnose stuff. They may get the wrong ID for a tree during the summer. We're going to go over a little bit of that. We're going to go over things that change during the summer and kind of just give you better pointers for your maple trees. We're going to kind of give this an all-encompassing podcast for the summer for maples and just discuss a lot of different things that goes on in the summer specifically for your Japanese maples.
Now, first off, what not to do. I'm going to go ahead and tell you straight up. Don't bare root your Japanese maples in the summer.
Or your ginkgos, or your anything. Definitely not your stewardia. But definitely don't bare root your Japanese maples. So we see this more common than not. People will decide to go look for root flare, or they'll decide to make major changes to their maples. This is the time of the year you don't want to disturb your root ball. So this isn't the time to be digging into the root ball, bare rooting your tree. They're just going to simply lose moisture so much quicker during the season. You're going to disturb microfibrous roots. And I would suggest not doing it because you're going to have tip dieback for sure if you're bare rooting a Japanese maple during this time. Now,
if you don't have tip dieback, you can kill it. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the microfibrous roots are the things that actually come in and take water up and nutrients up. So if you're damaging those microfibrous roots in the summer, say goodbye to your Japanese maple. It's not going to live.
Just saying that made me need to drink some water. I started getting dry thinking about that poor tree. I had to go for some water quick. So yeah, this can certainly damage your tree by doing that wrong. There's a lot of bad information out there. Now, we've talked a lot about moving Japanese maples. We have a whole video on that on the Mr. Maple Show about the ideal times. But you want to move Japanese maples when they're out of leaf. That's the ideal time. There's a lot less transpiration through the foliage, and you're just going to have so much more success. So now is not the ideal time to move a tree, especially during your peak heat. You want to be moving those during the more easy times of the year. Now, we certainly end up planting a lot of trees during the summer still here at Mr. Maple. It's an inevitable time that we actually have time to plant. So we get trees in the ground. It is a little trickier. You have to water a little bit more when planting during the season.
Yeah, whenever you plant in the ground, it's almost like you have it in a container. You're still taking care of it in a container. If you have it in a container, you have to continue to water it during the summer. Well, if you're putting one out in the ground, you have to continue to water it like it is in a container. It takes more care. But during the summer, the heat will actually push the roots out, and you'll actually get a tree established quicker by planting it in the summer than you would during the spring or the fall.
Now, my ideal time, I actually love planting trees toward the end of summer. So that later part of the summer, I try to avoid the earliest part of the summer just because it's so dry. But I actually love planting trees in that late summer heat. So like that later June, sometimes August, early September. I'll get into that. I'll try to avoid June as much as possible. But if I'm getting into August time frame for planting, I actually love it. You'll get a little bit of burn on trees, but they'll put on more roots for that winter and get established. So I absolutely love that. It goes against what a lot of people say for planting, but sometimes I'll intentionally plant my fall plantings a little earlier than most people. So that late summer period, I think, is a little more optimal than people think.
When I plant something in the summer, I water it about every other day. I want to try to water it less and less, and so that it can actually go and start putting roots out. I think it's essential to continue to make sure you're taking care of it. It takes thought of planting in the summer, where in the springtime or the fall, sometimes you can just put a tree in the ground and it does its thing. And, you may look at it for a week and then, you don't have to take care of it after that.
Right.
Summer, if you're planting in the summer, it requires constant attention throughout most of the summer, especially as that heat ramps up. It can be done. It just takes more care.
Now, what I tend to do is water every other day for the first 2 weeks and then kind of decrease that water amount. So I tend to decrease that water amount once it gets a little more established. You got to be careful, though. Things dry out. Water patterns change during the summer. In our area, we get a lot more rain. In places like Oregon, they're in their higher drought time of the year. So we're certainly getting more rain in later summer here in western North Carolina. So you got to be careful and kind of know your area, too, a little bit. But just be attentive to the water more, especially when planting in that summer time frame. And late summer is easier than early summer. So, July and June tend to be some of the harder times to plant. But as you get into that August time frame, I think that's really optimal for me. I love getting trees out because you get so much more root growth on. They'll actually throw on more root growth than top growth. But yeah, lots of things to get into here with the summer for Japanese maples. You're definitely going to see a lot of changes during Japanese maples during the summer. Now, I think it's kind of a joke nurserymen say all the time, but it's like, it's an old Japanese proverb, but it's really just something nurserymen say. But it's like you look at Japanese maples close up in the spring, you look at them close up in the fall, and from a distance in the summer. You're going to get some, we want to maybe give you ample expectations for summer. It's not uncommon to have a little more crunchy growth, a little more tip dieback, especially on a new growth tree. Not really tip dieback, but more crunchier foliage. A little bit of dryback is not uncommon on a young planting.
Yeah, especially as it's getting established, because it's going to try to it's trying to put out roots and take care of itself. And it may not have the roots well enough to really keep that foliage looking great during the summer yet. So a little bit of crunchiness on a new planting, not unusual, nothing to worry about.
I find that as trees get more established and older in the landscape, the better they look in the summer, especially younger trees. Even older trees, if they're newly planted, don't look great in the summer. It's the tree that's been established in that spot for a while.
Once its roots get tapped in to the water,
yeah.
I mean, it's going to be great.
Well, they start taking up energy so much more efficiently, the longer they've been in that spot.
Let's talk about leaf spots. Now, we're going to talk about myths about leaf spots. What are leaf spots, and should we be concerned about them?
Hey, is water causing all these spots on my tree? I think it rained, and the tree got hot. And
Man, it was above 90 degrees.
Yeah, we watered when it was too hot, and it made spots all over my tree. I see that one so much in the Japanese maple groups as kind of a incorrect myth about summer. People will look at it and they'll say, I've watered the tree, it's gotten rain on it, or something, like the rain somehow did it. But it's got these spots all over it. Is that from water, Tim?
No, it is not. The myth busted. When it comes to those leaf spots, it's a fungus that's sort of spread around by leafhoppers, and it's all across the country. It happens to Japanese maples everywhere. And little leafhopper, little bugs go around and spread this fungus in the early to mid spring. So
most of the time, by you see it, it's already too late.
Yeah, once you see it, it's already too late, and it's nothing to really worry about because long term, it doesn't do any real damage to the tree. It just makes the trees not look as great in the summer, and in the fall with fall color, you don't really notice it as much. The spots don't show up till after spring because that fungus really doesn't really. It just makes those nice small little circles is what they make.
I've seen people way over try to do too much for this. I've seen a lot of times people say I had some spots on the leaves, so I defoliated the whole tree. I cut all the foliage off of it. Now in summer they are very forgiving because there's a lot of buds back there to relief. But I don't recommend that because your tree's putting all that energy back into that. I've seen people really go too far to try to compensate this thing. And really what you need to do is just accept that there's going to be some spots on it during this time of the year, if it's already happened, and then wait for the foliage to get better.
Yeah, the foliage will drop off in the fall. New growth in the spring will look great and amazing again. And if you don't do anything, your tree is going to be fine. If you're somebody who's like, I really want my trees not to have those little spots on them during the summer, the way to do that is to treat for the leafhoppers in the early to mid spring. And so by using insecticide, which I'm a minimalist, I try not using I barely put out insecticide, only what's required.
Except for when it comes to sunscreen, then you're a maximalist.
Then I am a maximalist. But whenever you're out there in the garden and in the spring, early spring, mid spring, if you're treating for insects around your Japanese maples, you can actually kill off the leafhoppers and prevent the spread of this little spots from the fungus on your leaves. It can be done, but then again, you have to make sure that whatever you're using is safe for your Japanese maple. So that is critical with any insecticide or herbicide that you use near your Japanese maple. You got to be very careful because Japanese maples, they're tender.
Now let's talk a little bit about dry leaves. During this time of the year, it's not uncommon to get a little bit of a ringlet around the tree of drying out. A lot of times people will go on vacation. They'll have a tree in a container. They'll come back. The tree will look a little worse when they got back because it wasn't getting as much water. A lot of people will have a tree in the ground. They'll forget about it for, a few weeks, and then they'll look at it and they'll say, my tree it's getting a little bit of crunchiness to it. Now, here's the crazy part of the question. Here's the crazy part of the equation, and you'll have to figure this out for your own individual garden. Too wet and too dry can look very similar in the summer. So oftentimes somebody will send me a picture of their tree and will say, hey, what's going wrong? And we'll say, I think your tree might be too wet. And they'll say, that's impossible. But you have to know your situation because too wet and too dry can look very similar on maple leaves during the summer.
And thankfully, dry is what happens the most. And that is actually the safest thing for your Japanese maple. Too wet can kill your Japanese maple quick. Too dry can make your tree look like it's dying during the summer, but really what often happens is the tree's first line of defense is to start to drop all of its foliage.
Maples are so much more forgiving than conifers.
So much more forgiving in the summer. And so when it's basically those leaves wilt up, right behind it during the summer, there's already a bud set behind it. So if you do have this happen in your garden where you've got a Japanese maple that dries up, the easiest and best thing you can do, if it's in a container, put it in the ground or a slightly bigger pot and water it. And as you continue to water it and letting it dry out, going through that watering and drying out, it will rebud and re-leaf. And during this time of the season, you can actually use liquid fertilizer, something like Miracle Grow, to promote that growth again. But as we'll get into a little bit later, this isn't really the season to do a lot of fertilization.
Yeah, you don't want to be overdoing it. You want to be a minimalist in the summer. You want to let nature take its course. You want the trees to kind of adapt and become a little bit more resilient there. So I don't recommend overdoing things like cutting the foliage off. I've seen people do that a lot. They'll go, oh, my tree got a little crispy, so I took all the foliage off of it and reliefed it. Well, you're causing that tree to go through a spring regeneration, and a lot of that foliage is going to be fresh and new. It might not be ready for the sun either, so it might come out and get crisped up as well if you're putting on a lot of fresh foliage during the summer. So I don't recommend ripping all the clothes off your tree. It doesn't need to be naked right now. Is this a bad time to be naked in full sun?
And it's also a bad idea. The worst thing someone can do is go through and pull off the leaves by their hand. Because if you're out there pulling the leaf off by your hand, that leaf stem goes down and attaches to the bud underneath. And when you're actually removing that bud shield, as our good friend Carl Munn calls it, you can actually damage the bud down below.
Then it might not leaf out.
Then it might not leaf out at all because the buds that we're going to be pushing out growth have now been damaged. So if someone is defoliating their tree, which is a bonsai trick some people do during certain times of the season, you don't pull off the leaf by hand. It is a scissor tactic. Where you actually leaf that leaf stem on there and just cut off the leaf.
Now, why is my blood good green right now? That's a common question. Why is my red Japanese maple getting more green? It depends a little bit on your environment.
And the cultivar.
And the season. So I've had years here where we were in more drought in western North Carolina. It's always been my theory that the trees look for more chlorophyll in those drought years. They're trying to create energy. They're trying to get water. You'll find seasons here where a lot of our trees in that big established garden over at Mom and Dad's are more green than other years. And some of that's just conditional. It's going to be the normal progression of that season and the reacting to the weather you have. So some years trees will be more green than other years. That's just a fact.
I know that Tamukiyama is a red weeping lace leaf that holds its color well throughout the summer. I remember the year we had wildfires in western North Carolina and there was not a cloud in the sky and Tamukiyamas were greener. It was so unusual for us.
Fire glows, Emperor Ones, they were some of their most, Twombly's Red Sentinel, normally a gold standard for holding color, and all these were way more green in that June, July, August in our drought when we were having those fires. So you can definitely see some conditional changes. Now, if you have a red cultivar and it's in heavy shade, you're always going to green up in the summer. So if you have a young blood good and you have it in heavy shade, even sometimes coming out of a box for a couple days, that can green up more in the summer months. That's perfectly normal. Now, a lot of our trees in our greenhouses, they're in about a 50% poly, and they're all getting watered together. So we're keeping trees in a location so that they can get watered adequately. Now, because of that, some of those trees will be a little greener than they would be out in the landscape as well. So just, factor that into your expectations for red. As you get these trees out in the ground, most years, stuff like Fire Glow, Emperor One, Tamukiyama, Hot Sauce, some of those awesome reds, they're going to be the gold standard for holding that red late into the season. Our whole podcast on talking about what looks best in the summer, definitely check that out because we go through and we give you a lot of detailed notes on some of our favorite summer trees and what looks the best. Some seasons, though, it's unavoidable. Like I said, that drought year we had that fire, I've never seen the garden be greener.
I mean, that's so true. And there are some red selections like red filigree lace or Hime Sojo that they hold their color better in the shade than others. Mm-hmm. And so we cover that in our top 50 podcast. You should definitely go check that out for top 50 summer interest Japanese maples. If you're interested in what, maples are the best in the summer. But whenever it comes to growing Japanese maples and there being ones that turn greener, some cultivars naturally just go greener anyways during the summer. And sometimes those are some of the best that give you some of the some amazing fall color as well. So there are some benefits. Often in the summer, if a red selection has started to get a little bit of green into it, that's the chlorophyll part of the leaf, it will continue to hold that green throughout rest of the year, almost until the fall. Mm-hmm. Once the chlorophyll comes in, it's more dominant than the genes that carry the red and the parts of the plant that carry the red. And when that happens, it becomes very prominent throughout the rest of the season. So if it gets a little bit of green to it during the summer, it's going to be very common for it to hold that until it goes to the fall color.
And that can be conditional too. So like I was saying, if you have your red trees in heavy shade, which is a great way to do it if you have them in containers right now, they're going to be greener than you expected in the sunlight. So they need a little bit of morning sun to kind of peak those colors up. Now, I want to get into this because one of our most commonly asked questions, and one of the things I see go wrong the most online when I'm like going through and seeing what people are saying, a lot of people misdiagnose trees as incorrect. They'll say, you got the wrong cultivar, you got the wrong thing, oh, you got a reversion on it. Somebody will send me a picture of a tree and they'll say, this must be the rootstock above the graft. And these are all misconceptions. Like during the summer, it's not uncommon to have odd juvenile growth. You're going to have late summer growth come on because of that heat. Expect those traits to be expressed differently than your spring growth. So, something like Higasiyama may throw on a lot of green new growth. That doesn't mean you need to trim all that out. It's not a reversion on that. There's certain cultivars I always recommend trimming all the green out. Something like Butterfly, Benny Shishihinga. We're really specific about telling you guys which ones. A lot of cultivars are going to look different on summer growth. Don't worry about that. Don't freak out. Don't make any changes to your tree. It's perfectly normal for summer growth. It's actually going to come back normal next year. One of the most common ones right now is Peve starfish. So a lot of people will get a Peve starfish, a Trompenberg, one of those more convex style leaves. You see it on Jordan. People say the Jordan has small foliage. I think I should cut it all off. It's nothing abnormal. It's late summer new growth. The heat affects that growth sometimes and it'll come out more flat. It does not revert back to flat. Like that's not going to be a thing. Leave that growth on, especially as it hardens off. You're just cutting yourself out of a year of growth if you take it away.
Now, certain varieties like the lunar lobum styles, like Koto no Ito or Scolopendra folium, they're going to have slightly Biniotaki, Punkil. They're going to have slightly wider growth during the summer than they did during the spring. This is very typical. This isn't a reversion on those. Now, if you see that wider growth in the springtime, I would tag those branches and continue to watch and see if they could possibly be a reversion, because there can be some reversions from time to time on lunar lobum styles, but it's not very typical. And
we avoid that here a lot by grafting the right rootstock. There are rootstocks you can graft to. If people graft to more Amoenum styles and larger leaf styles, so if people are grafting, say, Koto no Ito into something like an Osakazuki style leaf, for example, that will cause more reversion on that tree to larger foliage. We graft to a Acer palmatum subspecies palmatum. That's why it's the gold standard in the trade. You get less of the natural reversion going on. So if it's grafted properly and done right, you shouldn't be seeing a lot of reversion. Now that larger growth right now, watch it. But if it's just on the new growth, that's perfectly normal.
Yeah, and so that's something just to keep in mind, that there's a lot of unusual new growth during the summer on lots of varieties of Japanese maples. That's very typical, and they will get untypical growth during the summer. And when you have untypical growth, that means if you're posting photos of it online, a lot of people are going to give you the wrong answers. In fact, I will say most of the time when you post a tree online and you ask for the general population to identify a tree for you, you're going to get the wrong answer.
During summer, it's hard. Summer's one of the hardest times to identify a tree. Like when somebody sends me a picture of a tree right now, and not to toot our own horn, but I think Tim and I are some of the best at giving you an educated guess. Maple Site did a quiz a couple years ago, and Buckholz did it, and Tim came in 1 and I came in 2 on like identifying species and maples, 180 of each.
And there was people in charge of arboretums there.
Right.
There were people there.
We'll give you the best
nurserymen.
educated guess possible. So we're pretty good at that. When people send me a tree during the summer, I go, hey, can you give me a fall color? Hey, can you give me a spring color? I need some more indicators. Because a lot of things will look more similar right now, and they'll also look more odd. So people will send pictures of things like, say even like emerald sunset, and they'll say, well, that can't be emerald sunset. Look how divided and weird the leaf is. It didn't look like that at all in spring. Summer juvenile growth can really throw you for a loop, and you're going to get variances in how it looks. So it's going to go back to normal, but that's not uncommon, especially on young trees. We don't see it a lot on big trees, but that's also because a lot of that big trees are raised up, they're above our heads, so that new growth's occurring out of our sight sometimes. You'll see this a lot on younger trees, so don't be quick to misdiagnose a tree or miscultivar a tree. You'll be really easy to go, oh my gosh, this tree's completely wrong. It doesn't have a purple border. It's got a long leaf to it. Things just don't look right. Well, that's pretty common in the summer too. So I want to give you the proper expectations for that.
Let's talk about a more rare cultivar, Koya Madani Nishiki. Sometimes the new growth during the summer can be more pointed. It's known for having rounded foliage on the ends. And so when you look at it with that new growth on with this more pointed, it can be very confusing on that new growth. So again, everything is a little bit jacked up in the summer a little bit whenever it comes to the new growth. So don't be afraid of that. Don't be worried. You can always send us a photo to MrMapleQuestions@gmail.com if you have any questions. It's often better to do that than to post online. While we have a ton of people now who are fans of gardening with Japanese maples, there's a lot of
Sometimes
new
you
people.
get some bad information.
There's a lot of bad information out there.
There's a lot of people been doing this a year or two will chime in and give you the wrong information.
There's a lot of people who think they're a doctor after
Right.
throwing some ice on some Japanese maples,
Right.
And they then think they're experts and think they know about Japanese maples. So do be careful out there because there's a lot of bad information. Matt is the former president of Maple Society. I'm a former president of Maple Society. We travel the world. And
we care about getting it right.
We care about getting it right. And we've been doing this our entire lives. And so we're very passionate about it. And we want to get you the right information out there.
There's good information out there too, but just be careful and take it with a grain of salt because there are a lot of people who are new to maples who will diagnose something with a lot of confidence and they'll tell you, oh my gosh, that could never be Osakazuki. The leaf's too divided right now. The leaf's way too divided. Summer growth's going to throw you for a loop. It just is. If you've watched them enough seasons, believe it or not, I'm coming in on 20 years in 2028 of doing this full time. So it's been a minute. We've been growing Japanese maples with our dad our whole life. And a lot of things you have to look at each year. And then you'll have those outlier years like you were talking about. I mean, if you only been growing Japanese maples 1 year and it was the year the fires were happening here, you'd say, well, how does Tamukiyama hold its color? Well, it's completely green.
Yeah.
It's completely green in August.
And if you only grew Japanese maples in your region and only saw them in your region, it's going to be very different across the country and across the world.
We want to give you proper expectations because, to be honest with you, maples don't look their most perfect of the year during the summer. They look good. They're still awesome plants in landscape. But if you're expecting the pristineness of spring in July, June, July, August, you need to lower your expectations. What was the old Mad TV lowered expectations? You remember that one? It was like the dating app. It was like lowered expectations. You need to lower your expectations if you think your eye candy is going to look exactly like it did in spring in August, because it is going to green up more. So expect that. Know what you're getting into. We're going to be upfront with you and give you the good, the bad, everything about it. So we're trying to create a more honest picture of what it does. And some of that greening up's awesome because it's going to provide more pristine foliage for your fall color. So some of that's natural nature, and it's exactly what the trees should be doing.
All right. So Japanese maples in the summer, they need more water. If you've got some in the ground and they're new, they're going to need more water than they did in the spring, and they're going to need more water than they did in the fall. They do in the fall. And that's because the trees have more heat on them. And those leaves are transpiring. They're releasing more water. And the plant needs more water as it's preparing for its summer flush of growth as well, especially if you fertilized. Often people go out there and they fertilize a lot and they don't water. I saw somebody the other day who posted a photo of a Baton Rouge, and they said, this cultivar is not heat tolerant. This is a 2-year tree. And I looked at it and it had a ton of growth.
And in a container in the sun.
And in the sun. And it had been over-fertilized. Over-fertilization can cause a plant to lose its heat tolerance. Baton Rouge is one of the most heat-tolerant Japanese maples we do.
Yeah, the guy was kind of ragging us a little bit. Like Matt and Tim call this heat tolerant. I was like, all right, look here, man. I didn't introduce this tree. It came from Warren, Texas. It's about 30 minutes above Houston. you want to find out heat tolerance? I laugh at people in like Spartanburg when they say this tree isn't heat tolerant. Like, this tree came from Texas outside of Houston, buddy. Like facts. Facts are better than your opinion sometimes. Maybe the conditions around the tree are leading to it not looking as pristine. It might not be the tree. It might be you. It might be sometimes.
Especially if you also have issues with hot blonde.
Right.
So when over-fertilization can cause burn on foliage, and that is a common problem, especially if you're starting to see that often means that you're putting too much fertilizer on, or your ratio to water and fertilizing isn't right. That may mean that you need to water more. So you're either putting too much fertilizer on if you're seeing this fertilizer burn on heat-tolerant varieties for you, or you're underwatering. So keep that in mind. Over-fertilizing is a bad problem in the summer, and you really start to see it as that heat ramps up, because over-fertilizing makes the plant less heat tolerant and less cold tolerant.
You're stretching out those cell walls. You're getting more growth, but that new growth is going to be more susceptible to the heat. So those are factors to think about. Now, we cut all of our granulated fertilizers off in May. That's one of our rules here at Mr. Maple. We try to slow down that fertilizer a good bit during the season. A lot of those fertilizers, I say this so many times, but I love to reiterate to people, they'll have a 180-day release. So if you're putting out fertilizers in August, 180 days can get pretty cold. 180 days can be frost freezes here in western North Carolina from August. So you want to be very conscious of what you're doing. You don't want to be setting your tree up for having too much growth during the wrong season. You want a moderately grown tree that grows and is effective, but you don't want to over push it. We could get a 4-foot tall blood good in a year. That just wouldn't be a great plant. It wouldn't be a great plant. So insane growth isn't always the best thing.
Yeah, that's so true. And if you do need to liquid fertilize during the summer, liquid fertilizers can be done, but you still need to cut it off as you're approaching fall. You get a month and a half out from fall, and you better stop on your liquid. And that's different across the United States from where that actually is for you. You want that tree to have hardened growth going into the fall, and slow release fertilizers this time of the season continue to push late into the season, especially if you just start reading the package and realize this is a 180-day release. Mm-hmm. Well, what's 180 days from now? Oh, shoot. This is pushing nitrogen to this tree too late in the season. Liquid fertilizers that are quick release are your best friend, because you're adding water and fertilizer at the same time. When you're adding water and fertilizer at the same time, guess what? You're likely not going to get the fertilizer burn if you do it with the right amounts on your liquid fertilizer, because you've got that water to fertilizer ratio correct. It's going to allow some new growth during the summer, especially. And the main reason I use liquid fertilizers in the summer is if you've had a plant that's been stressed, if you've had a plant that has went to dropping its leaves, you're going to want to push growth on that and get that growth hardened off so it can get the buds formed behind that for the next spring push.
Now, I would say during the summer months is when you see the most issues out of your organic fertilizers and fish emulsions. They can be great. I'm not against organic fertilizers. You have to be careful. A lot of times people put high nitrogen manures and things out. That can cause really exaggerated growth in this kind of heat. Fish emulsion can work great, but only in moderation. You don't want to be overdoing it. I'll have people with koi ponds, and they'll say, man, I've got an endless amount of fish emulsion. During those summer months, that's when you'll see some damage from salt buildup. So there can be too much salts in those. They're okay to use in moderation over time, but a lot of that will stay in your soil. So you'll start to see negative effects in that higher heat time of year, especially from fish emulsion. I see people overdo it with that, and it'll catch up to them in those late summer months. They'll wonder why everything kind of looks a little more ratty. Things are looking a little bit more distressed than normal. And it can be a salt buildup that's kind of changing your pH or throwing the whole tree dynamic off.
Yeah, I mean, fish emulsion works great in pushing growth, but it does over push. And if you consistently use it, I mean, if you use it once a year, I don't think it'll be that big of a problem if you use it in the spring. But if you consistently use it over and over throughout the season, you're going to start to get issues with that buildup. It causes issues long term, and it's not something that I recommend consistently using.
So in general, for summer fertilization, the answer is don't. because you're going to be setting your tree up for more winter problems. If you're over pushing it right now, you're going to be stretching the tree out. Can you get a lot of growth when summer fertilizing? Yes, but you can also cause a lot of problems for your tree.
And one of those problems is spider mites. If you've got your plant stressed out, all of a sudden it's releasing hormones for bugs to attack it. This happens in the spring. Sometimes, say you've had a early spring frost that happens and your tree's leafed out, you get damage. Well, sometimes that can attract spider mites. Late spring as well, if they get those those frosts that come in, spider mites. The same thing can happen if you're over fertilizing during the summer. All of a sudden, your Japanese maple saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm juicy," and I'm slightly stressed.
It's got the 90s juicy across the back of the behind on the pants. I was like, that one came back briefly. I saw people wear that again. That was the thing when I went to college. All the girls were wearing pants that said juicy on the behind. I'm glad that's gone. That's a weird. I don't know what that trend was. You don't want that juicy across the behind of your Japanese maple because it will attract the wrong attention.
And spider mites, while they don't cause a lot of permanent damage in small numbers, they can build up a lot and make your foliage look really ratty during the summer. How do you know if you've got spider mites? Take a white piece of paper out there, shake your leaves, your branches over top of that white piece of paper, and if you have little red dots,
shake it like a salt shaker.
Shake it like a salt shaker. And if you if you get little red dots on your piece of paper, you've got spider mites. Treatments for that are real simple: insecticidal soap. Do not make a concoction up at home that includes antibacterial soap.
That's one of the main mistakes people make now too.
That is damaging to your Japanese maples. Antibacterial soap will damage your plants.
Yeah, they'll dry them out too much. They get in there and they mess up a lot of what's going on in the plant.
The soap that's not antibacterial, that is safe. But if it is antibiotic or antibacterial, you got a problem.
Typically, we recommend insecticidal soap. So if you know you're dealing with an insect, go buy an insecticidal soap at a garden center. You can check the back of it. You don't want to use soaps that are antibacterial. That I've seen that stress trees out so much and then you've exacerbated the problem. Like things were already going wrong. Now you've got a second problem on top of that. So a lot of times what causes problems for trees isn't that first problem. It's the treatment that caused more problems and then kind of sent it down a bad path. So we've touched on a lot of different things. We've hovered around this topic, but it's a hot topic for summer: container gardening.
Yeah, container gardening. I think people who have a Japanese maple and they're growing it in a container in the spring and they've got it in full sun and the tree's doing fantastic, sometimes they forget that the summer, it may not be able to handle that exact same spot in the garden.
Now, I actually recommend, we're in 6B. We're in a very forgiving Western North Carolina climate. We're at about 2,300, 2,400 foot elevation here. Very forgiving sunlight conditions here. We were in Arizona last 2 weeks ago and it was not forgiving sunlight conditions in Phoenix, Arizona. Oh my gosh, hot as Hades. I feel for you guys. I like my cool nights and I like my early morning where it doesn't get hot until about 12.
Phoenix is hot.
Oh my gosh. Even when it was like 80, it was a different kind of 80. I get it. So guys, be careful with your containers in the summer. Even here in Western North Carolina, I recommend moving your Japanese maple containers to a more shaded condition. It may be filtered light. It may be a porch. It may be under some other trees where they're getting a mix of light and sun. But I don't recommend keeping Japanese maple containers in heavy, full sun. If you want them to look great, you want to move them to some shade. Move your containers to a more optimal condition in the summer. You're not going to water enough to make up the difference. That's the problem. The containers can dry out quicker. Different containers, not all containers are made equally for drying out either. Some of them are going to get really hot. If you've got like a black polished pot, I mean, I went to pick those up and almost burnt my hand off before. Felt like I was about to scream when I touched like one of those more ceramic polished pots.
Or concrete pots on concrete.
Yeah, those things get really hot.
Those things get super hot, and that can just bake the roots. I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're cooking the tree that's on the inside. And so those microfibrous roots that take up the water and the nutrients, everything that's close to that pot, as much as it will bake, will get baked. And you're burning those roots. So you're
watering, but that water's staying in there and getting so hot that you're boiling your tree too.
And think about it. If you're baking the roots and then you're watering it, you can actually get phytophthora root rot in the summer. Mm-hmm. And just from you're watering regular to make sure the plant doesn't dry out, but your pot is getting so hot that it's just burning those roots. So you're creating this bacteria area in your pot where your plant's going to get diseased and sick. So you got to be very careful about not baking your roots on your pots during those summer months.
Here's another hot ticket item that's controversial in the Japanese maple community, and that's rocks on containers. So can you put rocks on your containers? Can you put rocks around your Japanese maples? The answer is completely yes in some environments and completely no in other environments. So people use that as a one size fits all. Everybody rags on people online, like, get those rocks off the pot. And that may be the case for a lot of conditions. If you're in Memphis and you got rocks around your tree, you might as well put some charcoal on there and fire it up, right? I mean, there's some areas where it's going to get way too hot. So you got to be conscious in the summer of residual heats. Is the rock wall beside your tree creating too much residual heat? Is the glass window beside is the reflecting on your, office building, is that causing more residual heat? So be conscious of those residual heats in the summer. Rocks around your tree can certainly work if they have more relief. If they have some shade, a little bit more relief. I saw rocks around trees in Japan. I saw rocks in containers in Japan. It's not a thing that doesn't work, but you have to give the tree relief. You can't put that tree out in full sun in Columbia, South Carolina, put some charcoal blocks around it, get you a good little barbecue going. You're not making brisket. You want a tree here. So be cautious of that, and especially in your environment. Different environments are different. If you're in Texas, rocks around your tree might not be the ideal situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure, because what you're doing is you're adding that heat. And when you add that heat to the roots, one, you're maybe burning the roots underneath the tree. Mm-hmm. Two, you're creating residual heat that's going to dry out the foliage of your tree as well. So you're doing two things wrong. You're drying out your tree quicker, and so those leaves can get the more of that damaged look to them, but you're also creating damage to the roots, and so you're not getting the growth and the health that your tree could be having in the landscape. And so just because you could put rocks around them doesn't make it a good idea.
Could be done, certainly. I mean, look at bonsai. I mean, there's some amazing bonsai. You have to really procure your environment for the bonsai. You can't just go take a 200-year-old bonsai maple with gravel beds and then go put it in the full sun in a non-optimal condition, because it's going to die. So you need to be conscious of your conditions. So the answer to that is, well, yeah, of course you could put rocks around them, but you need to have the right condition for it.
Now, some people, they go with the other approach, trying to protect the roots if it's in the ground. They put mulch around it. Mm-hmm. And that, in a small amount, can relieve the roots from some extreme heats in hotter climates. And that is a very unique thing that you can do in hotter climates.
Are you recommending the volcano of death?
But I'm not, because that is where people mess up on this, is during the summer, if you see your plant just struggling, often people have mulched too much. And during the summer months,
if you're in a horticulture class and you're told to go put a volcano of death around a tree, if you're a professor in your landscape division, is telling you, stand up right now, walk up and slap the teacher in the face. That's what you need to do. Quit putting the volcano of death around trees, especially Japanese maples. You don't want to bury that graft. This is one of the times of year you notice trees are planted too deeply, because they start getting stressed. You don't want your tree too deep. We beat a dead horse with this all the time, but this is when you notice when your tree doesn't have good drainage, right? This is when your tree in the container is really, you're starting to find out whether that drainage was right on the pot or not. Definitely in summer.
I've actually got a short that I made on our YouTube channel with my wife at Jellystone, and she's going around and she's raking away. Jellystone's like a little campground.
You might be implementing her right now.
and literally, she was going around and raking away the mulch at the base of these Japanese maples.
Over the graft.
Yeah, because they had buried the graft on the Japanese maples with mulch. And if you do that, the plant's going to struggle. See, roots, they not only need, water and soil, but they also need oxygen. And if you're mulching too much, you're going to smother the roots of a Japanese maple. A Japanese maple is a more surface-rooted tree. It's not one that puts a root down to China. And you can actually smother those roots if you're actually putting too much mulch around the top.
Yeah, so be cautious of that. Be cautious of your drainage. I mean, I know we talk drainage all the time. They're like, oh, he's beating that dead horse again. Well, it's better to beat a dead horse than to throw away a dead maple. That's what I say. So make sure you don't have bad drainage on your container. Move your containers to a more shaded spot. I highly recommend it. You're going to have better success. You're going to have better fall color. And that goes for milder climates. You might get by with it a few seasons, but what's going to surprise you is that tree is going to continue to grow, and it's going to have less soil in that container. So unless you're taking the tree out in February, removing some soil, adding some soil back to it, what's going to happen is one year you're going to go to the beach, as we all do sometimes, and you're going to come back and you're going to go, I don't know why my tree dried out. Well, oftentimes that tree has less soil in there, so there's less water space, There's more roots. It's taking up all that water so much quicker. You know, you pull your tree up out of the container and you got just root and you got no soil left in there. That can happen. And you'll find that when those trees, they either need to be moved to the ground or to a bigger container because there's a lot less forgiveness on that heat spike.
Now, the thing we begin to see a lot during the summer, and it happens from late spring to summer, is weed killer damage. And when I say weed killer damage, I mean trees dying from weed killer. When people are putting out weed killer in your yard, go ahead, tell them ahead of time, I've got Japanese maples, stay away from them. If you get drift, which happens when there's just a slight wind, and you can kill a Japanese maple just from the drift from the weed killer and kill many plants, but you're going to pay attention more to the tree that you pay more for than you do than your petunias and pansies.
We're getting a lot of men in trouble right now. Right now, the wife is looking at the husband with those eyes. You know those eyes if you're married. We're like, right? Like, I think that was you, honey.
It may be the reverse though.
That happens either way. I'm not, we're getting some people in trouble in their marriages because people say there's no way nobody's put out weed killer. There's no way. And I was like, can you show me a photo of that? And you look at all the grass is dried and brown all around the base of the tree. And there's grass over on the corner and it's all dried and brown. You're like, I hate to tell you, but it looks like somebody put out weed killer. And you're like, my nephew did come over and do some gardening for me. And he was putting out, I didn't want to admit it, but my nephew was putting out weed killer 2 weeks ago. And it's like, you have to be so careful because that drift can get up so quick. It vaporizes kind of how it works. And we want to be careful not to get those trees spiked with weed killers, causing them a lot of trouble. I mean, it's way harder to reverse, nearly impossible. So it's better to avoid.
Yeah, weed killers, they're dangerous, and you have to really read the packaging to protect yourself, first off, because weed killers are dangerous. But secondly, when you're looking at weed killers, read the directions exactly what it says, because if you're putting it out and it's above, I think like 90 degrees or something, it actually turns into like this vapor that can move with the slight wind. And you always have a slight wind, even when you think it's a very calm day. I mean, we're always looking at our putting on our greenhouse polys, and we're following the wind, and we're like, if it's above 8 miles an hour, it's gonna be hard to keep that poly on. Guys, you want a no-wind situation when you're putting out.
It's tricky because it has to be a certain temperature for the weed killers to activate for people. And then if it's too high, you're going to get more vapors. So be very, very, very cautious with weed killers. Be very cautious with who you're allowing to do weed kill in your yard, and regulate it. I mean, if you have to go out there and line out how far you want them to get to it, do it. If you care about your maple collection, a lot of people listening to this have huge collections. Take the extra step. Go ahead and lay out parameters to how close they can get to the tree. Any trees within this distance of the tree, we're going to have to pull these weeds by hand. We don't want those weed killed. Let's not get around them. I've had great customers, and they had amazing collections. And a guy come and applied weed killer, and he didn't think it affected Japanese maples that were on standards. So he had a whole bunch of beautiful lace leaves that were on standards. Well, he didn't spray any of the foliage, right? He was staying away from the bases of any of the trees that had a lot of density down low. But he went too close to trees on standards. Still kills them. Gets on those roots, infects the plant, still kills the plant. So be very cautious of that. A lot of times the people spraying your chemicals will overlook standards.
That's exactly where my mind was going to, is because they get brave when they see a tree that's got this rootstock that sticks up and then the graft starting up higher, and they think they can get closer to it. And what happens is they end up getting some of those droplets of the weed killer or some of the drift gets onto the bark of the tree. Mm-hmm. And if it gets onto the bark of the tree, guess what, guys? That affects the tree just the same way. And that can definitely kill it, just like you getting onto the leaves.
And that drift is going to go up. So you're going to get the foliage. If you're getting that close to the base, you're going to get it into the foliage. You're going to get burned.
Y'all, I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast on our summer things you need to know about Japanese maples in summer.
Some negative Nancy's today. Definitely go watch our podcast. So definitely go watch our podcast on our favorite trees for summer. We did a 2-part series. It's 50 trees that we think show out the most in those summer months. So if you need to feel good about your maple collection after listening to this, if you need a little more encouragement, go listen to that podcast. There's some awesome looking trees for summer.
And if you have any more questions about Japanese maples, we do have our Mr. Maple Friends group. We've got a lot of people who watch a lot of our videos. You can definitely find a lot of answers there. You can email us at mrmaplequestions@gmail.com. We're always happy to help. And as always, make sure you're subscribed on our Mr. Maple Show on YouTube, because we put out daily content about Japanese maples, and we've got a whole bunch of videos all about how to care for your Japanese maples. If you're wanting to learn more about fertilization, We've got a whole podcast just on that.
Got a whole series on grafting, on pruning. There's so many different things. If there's a video you would like to see, I'd recommend you go to this video and recommend your suggestion for future videos under this video on YouTube. We'd love to see what you have. We love answering questions and helping people so they have proper expectations for what their trees should look like in the summer, so they have proper care. We want your trees to look awesome. We want them to perform for you in each season, and we want them to be a big part of your life. I mean, maples are a big part of my life. I get a lot of enjoyment out of maples, and so our goal here is to make sure your trees are bringing you joy too, so they look optimal.
So we hope you've learned something today on the podcast about what to know about Japanese maples for the summer. And if you like this type of thing and you're following us on your favorite podcast platform, give us a 5-star review. That helps more people follow us.
You can do it on Google also. Take care.
God bless.
Have yourself a great day.